Hey there, sales players. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing new sponsor, Lemlist. Whether you're closing deals or nurturing leads, Lemlist is your all-in-one platform for personalization outreach that converts. Picture this. You craft a killer email campaign in minutes using Lemlist's intuitive drag-and-drop editor. Want to stand out? Lemlist is here to help with advanced personalization that lets you dynamically insert custom images, videos, and even personalized landing pages based on your persona. With Lemlist Analytics, you'll know exactly who opened, clicked, and replied to your emails. Join thousands of sales professionals who trust Lemlist to supercharge their outreach efforts. Use the link in the show notes below and start your free trial today. Your personalized outreach just got a whole lot easier. Happy selling.
Welcome to Sales Players, the #1 podcast for top players in B2B sales.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the world of sales, this is the show for you.
We're all about bringing you fresh, actionable ideas to supercharge your Rev Gen game.
We dive deep into the mindset, habits, and tools used by top performers in the industry. Generate more leads, close more deals, and build wealth and financial security in B2B sales.
So if you're ready to level up, you've come to the right place. Join the conversation with other like-minded sales players and continue the discussion beyond the show.
Hit the subscribe button, tune into the Sales Players, and let's start winning together.
It's Jesse here, and I want to introduce you to a genuinely cool product that we just learned about called Evie AI. It is a LinkedIn AI content assistant that was built to enhance your LinkedIn presence, increase your exposure and productivity as a seller. You can create personas, generate ideas, generate comments, craft posts, and 10x your LinkedIn presence. We actually had Joe, the founder, on the show, and he was kind enough to put together a special offer for sales players. There is a link in the show notes with more details. Go check out Evie AI. That's EVY AI. So we're officially live here. Shimmy, welcome to the Sales Players. I think a good starting point would be just give us like the cocktail or the elevator pitch. If you were, running into someone at the bar, how would you describe what you do and how you add value?
Yeah, I appreciate that. First off, happy to be here and appreciate you guys having me. But, just a little bit about me. I'm somebody who got into sales a little bit later in life, had a background in product management and data science. So it was more on the technical side, moved into sales and really fell in love with it. And while I was in sales, I started to figure out how to leverage AI to do the things that I didn't want to have to do, like prospecting and, follow-ups and email management and things like that, which just sucked the life out of me. So I created Esek, which is a consultant agency where I help people automate the processes in their life and their specifically sales life that they don't want to do also. And, that's essentially how I want to help people and provide value. I want to give you the time back to spend on the things that you really love and care about.
So I forgot to ask, where are you based out of?
I'm based in New York.
New York. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. East Coast.
Yes,
nice.
And Shimmy, what was so interesting, I just came off of a demo and we're talking about AI and this, I'm going to share my screen. I mean, I just have to do this. This was the strangest demo that I've been on. So somebody was actually using an AI avatar on an actual demo screen.
No.
And I was like, this is a live Zoom call that I was on, and this guy was using this thing, and it was talking to me, and I was like, "Is this real?"
What?
No
and,
way.
I mean, this
that
guy
looks like the meta like VR avatars. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was like using like a headset or something. That's crazy.
And
I'm gonna take a squad shot real quick of this, Chase, just for because this is so interesting.
Yeah, and I was like, "What is going on?" And so this guy, I mean, he said he was referred to us by Alex Hermosi, and it's pretty amazing. Just I think that people don't really realize how fast we're moving at the rate of speed with AI and how things are going to be changing. And I feel like my life is just going more and more into the video game. Like I listen to Dan Coe, and he really talks about sort of like the hero's journey. And I really think that we're going into this age of content creation and just the sales world. Yeah. You're basically in like a World of Warcraft area, and like these AI tools can be tools that you can actually gather and get better at your job and to beat
I like
bosses,
that
to close
analogy.
deals, you know?
I think that's really cool. I think a lot of people are comparing it to sort of like the internet, like, you know, sort of blossoming in the mid 90s. I think the difference is it's definitely similar in the sense that we're still crazy early on the adoption curve. Like, you know, we're having these discussions and we're talking about this now, but the reality is, you know, you still have people in your life, and I'm sure you go up to them and they go, oh, like AI is like that chat GPT thing, right? And you're like, yeah. So like, for sure, there's still that version of it. And then there's the incredibly tactical version that people are, you know, leveraging, and I help people leverage on a daily basis. And so I think the difference between, like, let's just say that and the internet analogy is that the speed that we're moving at is, instead of years, we're moving in months. And it's crazy, just the innovation that's coming out month after month, the improvements that these models and these tools are seeing. It's honestly incredible. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting time for a lot of like sales softwares. It's my own personal opinion. I think like the big aggregator softwares like Salesforce and you know, like things like that are going to struggle, because people are going to be able to either create or purchase like these micro SaaSes or these really targeted tools that serve one purpose for 10% of the cost, and they'll be able to assemble a stack of them that integrate really well. And I think that they're not going to need to pay for, you know, crazy enterprise pricing at something like Salesforce or Gong or other people like that, you know. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. I'm sure it's like a pendulum, and it might shift back the other way at a point, but I don't know. It just seems to be a trend that I'm noticing.
This is, I was just having a conversation about this yesterday. This sounds like I think it's Chamath, who's one of the guys on the All In podcast, who's talked about, I don't remember what the name of his incubator is, but what he's trying to do is basically make like, you know how Walmart has like the generic brand vitamins or, you know, whatever,
value.
deli meat,
great value. All right,
360, or Kirkland, is it Kirkland from Costco? He's trying to basically make like the great value or the Kirkland
generic
software,
the
generic software products. Like, and his premise is like, most people who buy Salesforce don't use, you know, almost 90% of its functionality or something like that. I'm getting it totally wrong, but basically like most companies only use some portion of its functionality. So if you could just sell them a piece of it for a lesser cost, then that's going to be a huge business model. And I think that's kind of where your head's at
and traditionally, like, so many of these companies have been, they've been like aggregators and like barges, right? Like they've just tried to acquire other smaller companies or smaller tools so they can boast that they have so much functionality. And obviously it leads to, like, you know, integration issues and much more time to implement these softwares. But a lot of the times, you know, they might have purchased an entire company to solve 10% of a problem. And so they have so much functionality that just isn't quite necessary for a lot of the basic companies. Like, yeah, sure, if you're Google or you're, you know, Amazon, you're probably going to need a really different kind of a system. But if you're a 10-person startup, you know, why you don't need Salesforce. No, you don't need you don't need it. Yeah. Like, you know, you can create or have created for you a set of tools that does exactly the same thing. And, you know, gives you all the functionality at a tenth of the price.
Something that I see a lot, like, and I don't even think Jesse really knew about this because I'm more in the agency space. Like, I sell a lot to the agency world. And I've seen like this Go High Level has just exploded. And people are white labeling Go High Level, so they're having Go High Level extensions, and you can connect it with different things. Do it, you know, you can even have your AI stuff connected to it. But I'm seeing a lot of like agencies, a lot of like even bigger like content creators just creating their own white label instance, and then they're just selling it, and then they have their own SaaS tool.
Yeah, no, it's actually really cool. So I think Go High Level is a cool version, but it's much more akin to the great value example we were talking, the Kirkland example we were talking about before, right? It's a pretty generic CRM that can be, you know, it can be tricked out in any which way you want it, but it is ultimately that core thing. I think the interesting thing is these tools like Cursor and these tools like GPT Engineer that allow you to build out like fully functioning web apps in like 15, 20, 30 minutes. Those are the ones that are crazier to me, because those are the ones that now I can solve the specific problem that I have. So, you know, like Go High Level is still a CRM. It solves the basic problems a CRM solves. But if I have an issue where, like,
Go
for
into an
example.
example. Yeah, give me
Yeah,
an
yeah.
example, please.
Yeah, for example, like if I had I had someone who I was talking to last week, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to um, every time somebody came to their website, which is a pretty classic thing. Every time someone comes to your website, you want to send them a link, right? You want to send them an email, you want to put them in a campaign, whatever it is. So High Level has like functionality for that, but it's limited in terms of what it would integrate with, right? Mm-hmm. So it's limited in terms of how can you integrate it only if you're using specific email sending tools, only if you're using outreach, only if you're using, exactly, things like that.
Mail gun.
Whereas they were using some weird and archaic old tool, and there was just no integration. And so I'm like a little bit more technically savvy, but I'm certainly not an engineer by any stretch. I went into one of these platforms and basically was like, write me an API integration between High Level and this thing. It took 15 minutes and it worked 90% well. It took me another hour, 2 hours to just sort of like delve into it and solve it. But in a couple of hours, I solved the problem. It was done. It was working. It was fixed. And ultimately, they were able to send and connect their email provider and their email sender to their CRM, whereas there wasn't a pre-built integration. They didn't have to get someone on the phone at High Level. They didn't have to go and wait for the next product release. And I think that's the crazy and tremendously valuable part of this next wave for a lot of people is like, holy crap, there's so much stuff that I can make that's specific to me and my business and how I work and my workflows. And that's the really powerful part. That's the part that's going to unlock tremendous productivity gains, I think, for companies and people.
Okay, tell me if this sounds like you. You're a sales hunter with literally hundreds of target accounts in your territory and no idea who in your patch is even in the market for your solution. You've pulled all the reports, built all the lists, and you've done a bunch of account research, but you're still in the dark about where to find your low-hanging fruit. And look, you could waste another quarter smiling and dialing, grinding through a cold list, and blasting out emails, or you could do what I do and get Leadfeeder. Leadfeeder identifies the companies that visit your company's website and tracks on-site activity so you can see which leads from your region are ready to buy right now. Leadfeeder has customizable notifications, lead scoring, routing, and it works seamlessly with your CRM system. Right now, Sales Players has got the hookup on an extended 21-day free trial offer, so be sure to use the link in the show notes to sign up. Oh, and you should probably forward that link over to your ops team so they can get Leadfeeder set up for your whole team. Stop burning time and resources on leads that don't convert and sign up for Leadfeeder. So, Shimmy, you've got a guide that's like a salesperson's guide to AI. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. It's we call it the 90-day AI literacy challenge.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So maybe just bearing in mind, a lot of our listeners are reps on the front line doing prospecting and deals every single day. Chase mentioned also that we've got a growing populace of founders that tune into the show who are probably in early companies also doing, some form of like outreach and prospecting.
Yeah.
Maybe share with us a couple things from that guide that are, first principles for someone who's like doesn't want to think. And I'll be honest, like as a seller, sometimes it feels really overwhelming because they're, like you said, that things are moving so fast that it's hard to know where to get started. So maybe if you could share like 2 or 3 things from the guide that your average seller or maybe your average founder out there who has to start selling to grow their business can start to get some wins from AI.
Yeah, I think that's a really good. I think that's a really good question for me. When I think about it, I think about it in terms of like 3 major categories. I think you have like AI powered, let's call it lead generation prospecting. You have customer engagement, and you have like sales process optimization. Like you have like those are the 3 pillars that I think about. But in terms of, let's just dig into the first one, right, with like prospecting and lead gen. So I think that for a lot of us, we spend a lot of time as a rep myself. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out who is, you kind of roughly know your ICP, but you're trying to figure out, well, who exactly fits in that target, right? Who is a good person for me to reach out to? What are the titles I'm reaching out to? Things like that. And a lot of times we're pigeonholed into what we're told when we onboard, right? We're pigeonholed into like, we're looking for directors at this type of a thing, and this is what you're going after. When in reality, what we've seen is that people have the ability to win in other arenas that aren't necessarily put forward right at the beginning. And so what I think is really important is to be able to test the different people that you're prospecting into. And I think a tool that I use personally that I think is really good for this is a tool called Phantom Buster. And Phantom Buster is a tool that allows you to automate like LinkedIn outreach and scrape LinkedIn searches. And so what you can do is you can say, like, if you can search for someone in a LinkedIn sales nav search, right? Like you can search, that classic kind of filter setup of like someone in New York who posted on LinkedIn recently and is a C-level exec at, a marketing company, right? It can download, 2,000 people that fit that criteria. And then, you have their contact info, their LinkedIn, and then you can send them DMs, you can send them emails, things like that. And ultimately, for me, what I found a lot of value in was starting with just like a wide range of ICPs and then testing which ones converted the best. And so I think that's a great way to start, is just like really getting numbers driven. I think we get numbers driven about the revenue, and the commissions that we all have. But I think sometimes we're not as analytical about the process pieces. Where in the funnel are people falling off for us? I think for me, that's where I found success, and I think is a really good starting place. But I think, first principles, like we talked about, I know it's a little long winded, but first principles, I think, is just to think about, like, it's all about the three pillars. It's lead gen, right? Then it's about actually, engaging with the customer. And then it's about like process optimization. I think those are my three pillars.
And how does a person like interact with you? Are you like a coach or consultant? You just come in, look at your process, overview everything, and then you're like, hey, these are the tools, or like, let's just build out with the tech stack you already have. How do you come in and help an IC or a company?
Yeah. So it's a good question. I've really, kind of don't like to pigeonhole myself to any which way, but the way I've seen it so far is twofold. Number one is coming in and giving you an evaluation of, hey, here's your processes mapped out, and this is where I think you could benefit from the following tools. And then option number two is what I think is also really interesting, which is the fact that people now can use tools like Zapier, if you know those, or Make.com, if you've ever heard of those two.
Oh, yeah.
And so they can more or less automate anything repetitive that they have to do. And so if they want, I can, and I do for myself, but I will build out those repetitive workflows for them. So if you have, you want to onboard a customer the same way, you want to manage your inbox, things like that can all be done, pretty stock, and I can set that up for you. So it works in two ways.
What type of teams do you tend to work with? Is it I'm imagining it's B2B, of course, but is there any specific industries or verticals that you seem to be embracing this AI wave more than others?
I think the startup scene I've worked with a little bit, and they're very excited by it. I think a lot of them, like I've worked with a few early stage startups that are maybe like 5 to 10 people type. And for them, they're at a really good place because they're sitting around and, they're trying to maximize every ounce of every dollar that they've raised or everything that they've bootstrapped. And they want to just know that, like, can I get the maximum out of every employee that I have and not know that I'm leaving anything on the table? I think that's a huge deal for them. Additionally, I found, some success with people who are in the more archaic industries, things like manufacturing, warehousing, things like that are a little bit more, let's call it old school. Not as tech savvy. They're just blown away. A lot of them are just like, I want AI. You're like, okay, I know. we got to
be
build
careful, buddy. That's a big question. You could,
I'll take one AI, please.
Right, exactly.
Okay, sure. Here's your want fries with that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a medium AI. Is that what you want? Okay, cool. We got it. Yeah. So I think it's a range of industries, but I think startups and then the more older school industries are what I've seen so far.
And okay, so is it Shimmy?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Shimmy, something that I showed Jesse the other day. So we've just started, like, Jesse would call me like I'm able to book a lot of people for podcast randomly through Calendly DMs and LinkedIn DMs and things like that. But I showed him Grok on X the other day, which is I guess, what is that? And talk to me about how can I use Grok? Like, what is because we pay for X, I think it's like $12 or $16 a month, but I think it's a valuable tool that people don't know about that comes with your X account and can really add some value.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good question. I think a lot of these tools you have to always understand like they're as valuable as they're as good as what you put into them, right? So Grok is I think they call it an AI search assistant, but essentially what it is it's a really dynamic way for you to interact with the data that Twitter has. So if you think about like interacting with ChatGPT, right? You go in and you start to talk to it. It's only knowing the data that it was trained on, okay, which is just kind of generic internet data. So it's like a jack of all trades. Whereas Grok is trained on Twitter's native data, and it's really tactical. So you can ask it things like, what are good ways to structure tweets? What are effective hashtags? What are things like that? It actually is really, if you're like posting content, it's really good for. Um, it's also really good at taking the context of tweets and comments and things like that and relating it to a topic. So if you were curious, like what is the sentiment of people thinking about, B2B, prospecting, right? It would kind of profile those tweets and then give you a summary, which is really cool. And so I think that's like one of the interesting ways you might be able to use it. But does that kind of make sense, or anything else you would want to
Yeah, I mean,
delve into?
I just like dropped in my LinkedIn profile and said optimize my LinkedIn profile for
Yeah.
me being a Hyros employee and a podcaster, and it wrote. I mean, I was like, holy shit, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is like with a lot of the tools like the LLMs, right? Like the Chat GPTs, Groks, Claude, the writing that it does is oftentimes a little bit, it leaves what to be desired. Like I don't know if you've ever tried to
Yeah.
write anything with Chat GPT, but you're
Yep.
like, this is just not how a human writes. It's very I don't know, it's not quite.
It
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's missing some voice, right? Like
Yeah,
it
it
doesn't have
doesn't have
and it
tone.
doesn't have like tone or the voice, and it doesn't have like even some of the like quirks, right? Like a lot of people when they write, maybe their grammar is not perfect, right? And that's a style. It's a style, right? It's a
Yeah.
quirk, and so it's very much a machine wrote it. I know you can tune GPT with like I don't like a temperature, like point
Yeah.
0.9 or something, and that makes it a little more voicey, but it's
Yeah.
still
So
written by a
so just
machine.
yeah, so just so like, we make sure that we're kind of like delving into the right things here. Like when we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
temperature, it's actually interesting. Temperature is essentially how creative do you want the GPT to be, which is like,
Yeah.
like if you give it a really high temperature, you're essentially saying to it like you can make up whatever you want. Whereas a low temperature says, you please stick to the facts.
Oh shit.
So if you gave it a temperature of like zero point 0.2, that would be a low temperature, and that would say, please just stick to what I asked you to. Whereas zero point 0.7 would be, and then we went to Mars and we hopped over to Jupiter, and so it kind of just
Yeah.
it loses
Wow.
itself a little bit. But yeah, Grok is interesting because like you can automate things in Grok. I haven't done it, but I've kind of watched some videos and read about it where you can like automate like data entry, scheduling, follow ups. Like
Is
there's
there
like
a
some
good
automation.
person to follow on that, or how do you learn about this stuff? Like
I
that's
can
the
I
thing.
can
Like
I
how
can
the hell
link
do
it
we
in
learn about this stuff? You
yeah,
know?
100%. So I think that first of all, you kind of have to know who you're following on LinkedIn, Twitter, or
Mm-hmm.
X, right at this point.
Right.
So I post about this stuff routinely. So if,
Okay.
if people want to follow me, they're more than welcome to. But
Cool.
there are definitely also some other great people to follow. I can't remember their names. I know they're in my Twitter thread, and I'm happy to link them. We can link them in the bottom of the
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
kind of
Let's do
after,
that.
so
Yeah,
people
for
have
sure.
like a thing, as well as I'm happy to link the guide, like we said, the salesperson's guide to AI, which has a lot of the people that you would want to follow as well. It's kind of like, here are the sources of truth that we like, as well. So I think that those two would be good ways to look at it. But I definitely post about it a lot. I try to post about workflows that I've built out for people routinely. So I built last week. Someone asked me to help them build out like a content generation,
Mm-hmm.
workflow where they basically would just send a voice note in Slack of the topic that they wanted to talk about, and it would generate 10 different pieces of content about it. Um, there's a lot of really cool stuff that can be done.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the show, Chase, but I think that you're talking about the ability and the need of people in this age to sort of like build their own personal brand, right? You kind of like need to, you guys are ICs, so you get it. But the age of just sort of being like the employee who no one knows about is awesome, but it's kind of coming to an end. You need to have some voice, some opinion, something you're great at that people know about. And, posting content is one really great way to do it. And so if you can automate a lot of the lift that comes into doing that, I think it's really valuable. You don't have to spend hours thinking of topics to write about, then writing it. You can have something, get it 90% of the way there, and then you can, fine tune it as needed.
I have a loaded question for you.
Please do.
So let's say we've got a listener out there in the podosphere who's listening to this conversation right now, and for some reason they have such rigid thinking that they're like, all right, I got to pick one AI platform. I'm a frontline seller at a software company, and I've got to choose where to start investing. Is it ChatGPT? Is it Bard or Gemini or whatever Google's calling it now? Is it Grok? Is it something else that we don't even know about? Is it a tool like Cast Magic? Because Chase and I have been using Cast Magic, and it's very impressive, the stuff that it can do. We had Ramon, too, on the show, the founder of that tool, and we use it to repurpose a bunch of content. It's very well written, too, and it can tune the voice up really well without having to, know all the tricks and like quirks of a GPT. But yeah, I guess, figuratively speaking, gun to your head, you're a frontline seller. You got to choose one to start learning and being the best at. Where do you start?
Yeah. For me personally, I think it would be Claude, which is made by Anthropic, if you know that model.
No, I don't.
Okay, so I'd say it's widely considered in the AI space as probably second to ChatGPT, but it's better in a lot of different areas. Number one is the writing that comes out of it is much, much, much more high level. And much more human. So you can really write things, much more true to your voice, and you can tune it better. Additionally, the capabilities it has outside of just creating, text is really high. They have the ability to create full functioning web apps. It has the ability to create like automated processes within itself. You also, I think, would benefit from investing in an aggregation platform like Make or Zapier that allows you to string these different AI tools together, because that's ultimately where you get the most value. But if I had to pick just one, I would pick Claude, because that's where I spend 80% of my day anyway.
And just for listeners, because this is literally my first time hearing about this, it's Claude spelled CLAUDE.ai. I'm assuming that's
Claude.ai. Yeah,
Claude.
correct. Made by a Chinese company actually called Anthropic. And so they were like, it's really fascinating. They were behind OpenAI and ChatGPT for a long time. And it was like ChatGPT was running this race by itself. And then Claude came out of nowhere, and they doubled and tripled the amount of data they were trained on in the last year. And they've caught up, and in some people's opinions have surpassed ChatGPT.
Yeah, I was hearing Greg Eisenberg, and he calls it something else. He calls it Claude because he's French, 'cause he's a French Canadian. Greg over there in the other Canadian border.
Okay, well, he's cooler than me, so he gets to call it
I don't. Yeah, he's a lot cooler than me too. So, but I have a question for you. So I'm like the guy in the Slack channel who has zero context, who will just put something in. I just write a message, and it's like, hey, this needs to be done. Would there be a way that I could send that into Slack, and then it'd be like, Chase, you need to put some more context into this here. Can you just...
Oh, interesting. Yeah, probably. Because so the thing is that, really, I'm telling you, any of these tools that you use on a daily basis, if you can think of a way that you want to use it, 90% of the time we can actually come in and automate that thing. You have to be specific about what you want, because there's obviously a lot of room for interpretation. But the idea that you could basically have something that, you sent like a message into a Slack channel that would have to go through an approval, be like, is this deep enough? Do people have any idea what I'm talking about? Where do I need to add context? And if it doesn't have that context, send a message back being like, yo, we need more. That's definitely doable. You would string together, if you were just curious, you would string together like a Slack instance in like make.com. You'd do Slack, and then you would send that response to something like Claude or ChatGPT and say, read this. Does this have, do you have any context on what I'm talking about? And it would be, and if yes, this, if no, that, and then it would spit back a response. You would take that response and say, well, if I get this response, then I get cool, then I send a message to Chase, and if I don't get that response, then the message goes through. So there's a lot of stuff you can do in that world, and that's why I'm saying the value is anything that you want or can think of 90% of the time can be automated, which is the cool part.
And talk to me about I loved how you just walked through that, but let's say I'm an IC and I'm having issues. I hate fucking prospecting. I hate doing something. What if you're coming in, what do you need to know to be okay, when you take a step back, what do we need to think about to build out these automations? Do we want to think about the goal first off of what is the goal or what is the problem that I'm having at initially? I would love to learn when we're writing out these problems, when we're talking to somebody like you, how do you want us to frame this to be this is what I need built?
Yeah. So I'm a golfer, and I love to play golf. And if I don't know if you guys are players at all, but they teach you when you play competitive golf that you try to play the hole backwards. So you look at where the flag is, and if the flag's on the left side of the green, I know I want to be on the right side of the fairway, which means I need to be on the left side of the tee box. And that works because it gives me the best angle into each one of those shots. And the reason that's relevant to this is because, we need to know where you want to go first. I need to know what is your North Star, right? Is it, I hate prospecting, please prospect 100 accounts for me? Or is it, I just don't want to even have to think about what 100 accounts it is, figure out what they're supposed to be, and then prospect into them. You know what I'm saying? We need to know, we need to know exactly what you're trying to solve. Exactly.
Okay. And
so that's how I would always approach it. I always try to think about what's the outcome I want first, and then, kind of write the steps backwards from there. But you're talking to somebody who the first automation I ever created was a prospecting automation because I could not stand it. I couldn't stand filling up the pipeline. It made me want to shoot myself. So
can you just
what did you use?
Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, for sure. So the automation, it was actually when I was at my last company, and so I was using within their tech stack. I had to get a little creative because I didn't really have the full permissions, so I had to sort of have a couple of workarounds. But what I was able to do was basically we used ZoomInfo for a lot of prospecting on LinkedIn. We used Outreach for email sequences and ultimately let's call it the first touches and then the calls, and then we use Salesforce as a CRM to log it all. So the automation, the flow of basically what I built was I had a Google sheet that had the 5 ICPs that we were targeting. It would then feed those ICPs into ChatGPT, okay, which would then, and we asked ChatGPT to say, hey, give me a LinkedIn search navigator filter, right, for this ICP. So if I said I wanted marketing managers, it would say, okay, cool, marketing managers in X territory, blah blah blah. It would give me the specifics, and then once I took those specifics, I would put that into ZoomInfo. I would get all the people that fit there. So let's just say it was 1,000 people that fit that specific criteria. I would take those 1,000 records. I would actually put them back into a Google Sheet because I couldn't do this in Salesforce, but you could do it in your own CRM if you owned your company or had higher level permissions than I did. But I put them back in a Google Sheet. And then actually the interesting and really cool part was I took the email address that they had. So I had their domain name, right? So if you guys would be at salesplayers.com or whatever it is, I would take that and I would send a bot to their website that would then basically crawl their website and return all of the content. So it would say, cool, what is this website about? What do they do? Who are they? And it knew, also who we were and what our value prop was. And so then from there, it would say, okay, how could someone like me help them? And it would say, here you go, these are the 5 ways you could do it. And then that was so you ultimately, what I had was emails that were pre-written. I still had to go in and send them, but I had 100 emails a day that I could just look at that were pre-written with 4 or 5 actionable things we could help them with based on their website and what we did.
That's a game changer.
Crazy.
That's
crazy.
Let me ask, because I know this, we're going to get this question, or listeners are going to think this. What if I don't, first of all, did you have to get permission to build this? It sounds like you were an IC at this company.
Yeah.
So
I was
did
an
you
IC.
have to go get?
I had to get minor permissions, but once they kind of asked me what I was doing, I was like, this and that, and like kind of had to play vague because I don't think they were super excited about, me being able to 10x what other people were doing in the same time. But so you definitely have to get permissions if you're within an organization. If you're within a smaller company or a smaller startup or you're an IC, most likely they won't care. But the permissions are not going to be like crazy. You just need to give it enough. The truth is, you don't even really need the permissions as long as you're willing to use your own Google account. Like that's how basically I did it. I did it through my own Google Drive and my own ChatGPT accounts, things like that, because I ultimately didn't have the permissions that I needed.
And just like a reminder to people out there, try to get the permission
Please
or at least
do.
get it cleared, because I heard a story recently where someone went in and they took a bunch of like basically they were like, I'm just going to upload the whole company's G drive into one of these AIs. And there, there's things like privacy,
for sure.
Contracts,
you have to be
and
very
like, just
careful. Very careful.
Proprietary info.
What happened to
that is all going. It didn't end well.
Yeah.
You can imagine that's basically like they've shared the entire company's proprietary, inside legal stuff up to the like the world can now see that, right? So use your judgment. Don't be stupid about it. Like just use your gut like instincts and don't upload stuff like that. You don't want to upload like your data privacy agreement or any like private security documentation or something to
you're 100%
to ChatGPT.
Right. I think it's best used in a lot of areas like this, whereas there's nothing really not public or proprietary about combing LinkedIn for a specific criteria of people, right? That's not going to really get you in trouble. Obviously, you shouldn't be sharing notes about calls, prospects, things like that. I completely agree. You got to be careful with it, but if you're dealing with it strictly outside the business and you want to have it generate theoretical emails, because that's all it is, right? It's theoretically what the email would be if you were to send it. I think you're fine in that domain, but you definitely, I would agree, be careful, and it's not worth it's not worth it. And in 5 years, everyone will be using it anyways.
Right. Yeah, and so talk to us about we had Joe, who was the founder of Evie AI, on, and Evie AI is like this tool that helps you to write like content on LinkedIn, comments, things like this. So talk to us, like, how could you pull in a tool like that and help it with like just automatically prospecting? Like, would you connect it to like Make or Zapier and then just create some automations with that?
Yeah, I think you could definitely do it like that. I think I'm not as familiar with Evie. Is it like, it's like LinkedIn post creation? It's DMs? Like, where is it centered?
DMs, recommendations. Like, it just, it's similar to like what we talked about earlier where Chase was asking, is there a way to enhance Slack? But it's just, this one's specific to LinkedIn right now.
Yeah. So then I would say
being able to create content. Yeah.
Got you. So then I would say it's probably best suited in a workflow within like Make.com or Zapier. Just as its own thing that you could call. Again, like, what you want to do is you want to have your end goal in mind. So if your goal is, I want to reach out to 50 50 founders in New York, who are between $1 million and $2 million in revenue, whatever it is, right? Like, then you can have that sort of pre-written and use like a tool like Make or a tool like Zapier to loop through every record that you're going to have, so you don't have to manually input 50, 60, 100, 1,000 prospects. That's where the value really comes in, is automating the repetitive. I think you would leverage something like, it seems like Evie, you would leverage it for actually creating the content that you would send to those people. And I know that there are definitely some awesome tools in that space. So I'm sure Evie's great. Like, I'm sure it probably picks up like their profile and their experience, right, and stuff like that, and what they do, and personalizes it.
Yeah, it does so much, and it really just it's a great tool, just especially for just commenting and finding your ICP and just showing up. And he called it an assist, so it's not like fully doing it for you. I think you have to click the buttons and things like that. But I mean, awesome, it's a great tool. I've used it. And Joe it was just wild what he was doing. Like, he had like a bot voice. Like, if somebody shot him a DM, it would be like in a
accent, or like
accent, like a hip hop voice or something. And he would say, "Oh, I'm dangerous," and it's like, even the thing would say, and I'm like, "What the heck? How did you do this?"
There's the stuff of like AI voice things, as well as AI like video is really fascinating. Like I think like sort of avenue for people to go down also, because I actually built something. I'm like in the process of testing it. It's really interesting, but I can basically, so that same prospecting framework we talked about, right, where we get the prospect, we go to their website, we learn about who they are and how we can help. That's applicable to pretty much any business. But the interesting piece is, instead of having it write an email, I can say write a 60-second voice note script. And then if you, do you know the tool 11 Labs?
No.
Okay, so 11 Labs is a tool that lets you clone your voice in AI. So you can go in and you can basically be like, you give it like 2-3 minutes of you talking, and it gets your voice. I'm going to call it 90% right. And so you could then, but you see where I'm going with this, because then you could basically take the script that you had generated, put it into 11 Labs, and say, give, basically output this script. It has a personalized voice note from you that like is 90% you, and then you could send that out on LinkedIn, on DMs or wherever. And like, what kind of like high level outreach is that? It's tactical because you know how you're solving their problem. It's really personalized, and it's you. And so like, yeah, if they get on a call, maybe you'll sound like slightly different, but not enough where they're going to be like, was this AI? Like, you know what I mean? It's not like that. But there's a lot of really crazy stuff that's I'm saying coming out. And that's the interesting part, is that we're so early to all of this. Like, like there's so much going on, but we're so early to all of these tools.
And one of these days, Chase and I are going to do a whole podcast with just a AI voice. We're just going to type it up hey, I'm just kidding.
But if we did it, people that do that, I personally think I guarantee it loses the human connection. Personally, I think that's a big deal, and I think that's why it works in something like prospecting, because it's really just the first touch.
Yeah.
But I don't think like you're going to be like, I mean, Chase, you were talking about it. It weirded you out, kind of being on a Zoom call with an AI avatar.
Well,
so
I'm gonna sell that guy a bunch of high roast, so I'm cool with it right now. I'm like, all right, buddy,
I got you.
Let's sell it.
An avatar's money is as green as a physical person.
As long as the Stripe payment comes through, we're good. As long as that Stripe payment one comes through. So I got a quick question.
Yeah.
And this is like a problem that I have. Is there any tool that I can use voice notes for LinkedIn on the desktop? Is there a way around that where I don't have to use my iPhone?
Your phone, yeah. I have not seen that.
Okay.
I haven't seen a specific tool, but it's a good question, because I like LinkedIn voice notes also, and
it's a problem.
It is a problem.
Somebody can build a tool. So we wanted to ask you about follow-up on LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, on email, like using a tool like Lemlist. How would you utilize like Lemlist and some AI techniques in that to use some personalization there?
Yeah, I think Lemlist is really good. I've had more experience with some other tools, but Lemlist is kind of like, we're going to create like sequences also, right, in Lemlist, and we're going to do things like that. So for me, I think the beauty of leveraging AI is the ability to get personalization at scale. And so you can use something like Lemlist, right, where I can have it be fed the pre-written emails, right, that I had written in ChatGPT, and say, hey, send this out to, my 1,000 people. And Lemlist is going to take care of that. And it's going to be part of a sequence where maybe the next step isn't, a follow-up email necessarily. Maybe it's the personalized voice note we talked about, right? And so you can really you can have multi-threaded, multi-touch sequences where you can actually use the power of AI to, get better returns and more personalization and higher converting interactions, which I think is really cool. And so Lemlist would be super powerful in terms of setting up those sequences and those steps. That's how I would think about it.
Awesome. Yeah, Lemlist they're a partner of the podcast, so big shout out. And I'm glad to hear that they're building something that is thinking ahead to this wave, because I won't speak for any other tools, but it seems like a lot of tools are kind of in the they're in the past. They're 10, 20 years behind at this point as it relates to like being able to integrate in with these types of capabilities.
Yeah, that's a huge deal, and you have to be forward thinking with this stuff. Like we talked about, it's moving so fast that you're gonna, like Ferris Bueller, if you don't stop and look around in a while, right, you're gonna miss it. It's really, I'm saying it's really how it's going. Like every every month, 2 months, you're hearing about a new tool, something else that can be done. I think it's really interesting for salespeople in general. I think it's going to be a fascinating few years. I happen to view AI as more of like a force multiplier more than like a replacement type thing.
Agreed.
But I do think it's going to be really interesting because I think a lot of the audit, like the dumb stuff that we have to do, let's call it, the nitty gritty, tedious, repetitive stuff will be able to be automated. And then it'll be interesting to see like which kind of salespeople win after that. I think it's going to be really interesting to see.
Well, Shimmy, this was a great conversation. I learned a couple of new things here. I guess I got to go check out Claude or Claude or whatever, however you pronounce it. And Chase and I, we love learning about this stuff because we love any way we can kind of simplify our day-to-day, our workflows, and just generate more with less. First of all, I guess, how can listeners reach out to you if they want to utilize your services or learn more?
Yeah.
And then any final words of wisdom for anyone getting started with this stuff?
Yeah, I think if you want to reach out and learn more, you can check us out at asek.tech, which is ESEK.tech. Also, you can follow me on LinkedIn as well, which is Shimmy Savitsky. But if you're overwhelmed by a lot of this stuff and it's kind of catching you off guard, you feel like, holy crap, how am I ever gonna catch up or even learn? First off, like, everyone was there. We were all there. I was there 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever it is, right? Like, everyone feels that way. So don't worry. Just start by learning one or two small things. I can, in the guide that we'll link in the bottom of the show, I'll add in some people on YouTube who make great content about these automations and really will teach you from the ground up. And so if you want to understand this world, I think it's imperative. I think it's really important because ultimately someone else in your org is going to understand how to get 20, 30x out of the same time that you and they have. And so I think if you're not ready and prepared for that, you're gonna miss out, and I don't want to see that happen.
And Shimmy, you didn't agree to this, but if you do want to come in, we have the Slack community of the sales players, and would love to have you join there. And that's something where we do have like ICs, we have VPs, you got me, you got Jesse, we got some other chat bots in there that will talk to you if you're lonely. But would just love to get you in there, because I think that these are conversations that I think that a lot of times I don't want to admit how stupid I am on these things.
Of course,
and not open. And it's like, I just need somebody sometimes to say, just show me the way. Because if you show me the way, I'll do it every time.
I'd be honored to join and happy to help.
All right. Well, we got a free Slack community, and everybody can join. It's in the show notes. We'll give you the guide as well. But yeah, we got the free Slack community, so hit us up. Shimmy, this was awesome.
Please.
Man. Gosh.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
And what's your favorite pizza place in New York? I was on the podcast earlier this week. Come on.
That's a good one.
There's AI pizza, huh? Is there AI pizza in New York yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. My favorite spot is a spot downtown called Bravo.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of it?
Bravo.
Really good.
Okay.
All right. Gotta check that out next time.
Somebody was telling me about Beese the other night, and I was like, all right, I got to get up to New York and, get some pizza. Well, dude, this was great conversation. Yeah. And again, everybody connect with Shimmy on LinkedIn. He'll be in the Slack community, and get this guide. It'll help you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thanks, man. Appreciate all the insights.
Thank you, guys.